What's going on, Clippers fans? I'm Chuck Mockler here with Adam Osland. We are Clips and Dip. This is kind of another weird live bonus episode, I guess. But we're talking the Lawrence Frank end of season press conference, which how did you feel about it? There's a lot to kind of go over. Terence Mann had an interesting tweet after things just happened. We'll get into all that and more. But how do we feel?
I suppose we can pick it apart here now that it just ended about 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
And we can dive in and give you guys our feelings on some of it. Going off the quotes from Lawrence Frank, we could just start in kind of the order you put it in here, Chuck, which I think is how it went down. But on how the season ended, he said there's disappointment, obviously, season ending and falling short of our goal. Also a great sense of pride in how our group competed. I feel bad for our fans. I feel bad for Kawhi and Paul George, our team, our staff, Steve Ballmer, because we feel like we let our fans and that group down. Injuries suck. They suck, but they happen. I feel for our fans who have been with us every step of the way. We have to be honest with ourselves. We have to look in the mirror. It starts with me. We have to get back to honoring and respecting the regular season. We have to compete harder, more consistently, and we have to earn it. Everything has to be earned. We have to compete harder every single night. We owe it to ourselves. We owe it to our fans. The last 28 years, the NBA champion has been a top 3 seed. You have to earn it. The regular season matters. I take that as an encouraging sign that they're looking at the regular season and understanding where they came up short and just not having any consistency out there. And at times it looked like there was a lack of effort. You didn't know which team was going to show up.
Yeah, this era of the Clippers, like that's why fans were kind of frustrated about that quote. I do like that he said we have to get back to honoring and respecting the regular season. But will it change?
We'll see. I thought one of the other things he said was, what I don't want to do is let the injuries or how we fought in the postseason mask a disappointing regular season. I thought that was pretty telling.
Yeah, that's an honest quote.
Yeah, that is revealing there. And a lot of people were saying that. Clippers fans were saying that. Like, yeah, this is great, but the regular season was such a drag in so many different ways.
It was not fun, man. It was not a fun regular season of Clippers basketball. It was less fun than when Paul George and Kawhi were fully out, right?
When I was going through the season recap before game 1 against the Suns and putting together highlights to build up the hype for the postseason of what went down in the regular season, there were only about a dozen games that I felt were truly memorable in a positive way for the Clippers.
Celtics game, Kawhi's return, that was fun.
That was fun. The comeback on the Cavs late early in the season, the Norm comeback against the Portland Trail Blazers, his 22-point fourth quarter, the Kawhi game winner in Charlotte, the Paul George game winner against Houston early in the season, but it was Houston, and it took a game winner to beat them. The Memphis comeback, something born out of this night, that fourth quarter was special for them. The comeback late against Detroit, where they shouldn't have been down, but they had that 14-3 run to bring it into overtime to eventually win in the last 3.5 minutes was incredible. All the Kawhi dunks against the Spurs, the Batum 3 to send it into overtime against the New York Knicks in Madison Square Garden. Man against the Suns right before the All-Star break. Russ against Memphis when Kawhi was out all of a sudden in that 2-game miniseries in Memphis near the end of the year. The Kawhi dunk on Pirtle and the Raptors, Bones beating the Lakers. All the wins against the Lakers were highlights. But
right, yeah.
We're talking about a dozen games when typically when the Clippers are winning, closer to 50 games, there are just more enjoyable highlights and a team that, I don't know, over the years, going back to last year, a team without Kawhi Leonard all season long, a team that was missing Paul George outside of 31 games. I thought there was just more fight consistently during the regular season.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know. I feel like we've had the same conversation as Clippers fans the last 3 years in terms of regular season stuff. So How does that change that? We'll talk about this more when we do like a full episode. We're just kind of reacting.
I thought this season was distinctly
not fun.
Well, a turn that the last couple of seasons weren't. A turn for the worse that the last couple of seasons weren't. I didn't feel like that necessarily the last couple of years. Even when, let's say, they had all these comebacks, of course, that were fueling the fan base, the 20-point comebacks. There was a grittiness to them that looked to be lost at times this year, and that's why some people were surprised when you saw it again in the postseason. They certainly could flip that switch, but I think to Lawrence's point, they got to compete harder during the regular season like that. It can't just be in the postseason. The regular season does matter, and that was something we just didn't see enough for the 82 games.
Yeah, I totally agree. Do we get into the Kawhi and PG stuff or the roster stuff?
Whatever. You lead, Chuck.
Let's go Kawhi and PG. He talked the injuries. You know, he said Kawhi has to work around 3 injuries after coming off an ACL reconstruction. He also mentioned there's a difference between being injured and what people term as being load management, which is what we talked about on our last episode. Kawhi is actually hurt, despite some people thinking that he's not, I guess. But Kawhi is actually hurt.
I went off in my NBA in LA report that I do every day for AM 570 today. I may have
hell yeah,
have really gone after people in the talking heads that were acting like they were just load managing Kawhi Leonard in the playoffs when the guy has a torn meniscus, which apparently they found out about after game 2. Yeah. Lawrence Frank was asked about that as well.
Yeah, that was interesting. Oops, sorry for that echo there. Yeah, they found out after game 2. You know, he also mentioned like they're committed to Kawhi and PG. I think anyone kind of thinking that they weren't, like it just makes sense. He also mentioned that they're committed to Ty Lue. He said, why wouldn't he be back? Of course he's back. Ty is a terrific coach. Their contracts line up. I'm not sitting here saying that Ty Lue had an excellent regular season, you know, but if you look at how his contract lines up with Kawhi and PG's extensions, the Clippers weren't going to move this kind of core 3 before they gave it a full shot, I don't think.
Well, okay, so to both of those things, Kawhi, PG, and Coach Lue, if you go away from Coach Lue, who are you bringing in that's better? That has to be the question. Whenever someone wants someone gone, who do you replace him with that improves things? There are drawbacks and blind spots that every head coach has. I'm on Twitter all the time, on NBA Twitter specifically. I see Heat fans complaining about Eric Spoelstra. I see Warriors fans complaining about Steve Kerr.
Yeah.
The best coaches in the NBA can never do enough right for their fan base. And there are legitimate complaints, I think, to this season.
Oh, we're going to get into one of them.
Specifically.
Yeah, oh yeah.
We'll get into that. But who's better? Is Nick Nurse a better coach than him? Is that the area you would go?
Nick Nurse plays acoustic guitar. I don't want that man coaching our basketball team.
Okay, who's a better postseason best of 7 coach than Coach Lue? Who is better in a best of 7 series that you would rather have? Sure, but we can see the worth of him even without his guys. You can see how he's outsmarting the competition, and therefore, what's more important than that? If you're trying to win a championship, what is more important than having the best in-game strategist in the most pivotal moments in a 7-game series in the postseason? So for the shortcomings of Coach Lue, I think his strengths, the good with Coach Lue, far outweighs the bad, and the front office recognizes that, certainly.
Yeah, they're not, and it's like you said, like, who are we going to pick up? A lot of people assume that whenever Ty Lue's tenure with the Clippers is over, that Dan Craig would step in. That's like been kind of the succession plan that's been grumbled about, but we're not going to know for a couple years, I don't think.
And Coach Lue is young. We're not talking about an older coach that you're getting ready to pass the torch to somebody else beneath him in the coaching staff. He's a young head coach.
Right. That's a good call.
And getting better.
So let's talk the roster. Lawrence talked about he named Eric Gordon and Mason Plumlee specifically as guys they want to bring back. I think that makes total sense. I would be very happy if they were able to make Gordon and Plumlee come back for the Clippers, right? Like, I think that was
Yeah.
Not a lot of people upset at that.
I think Mason Plumlee more of a need than Eric Gordon. I like Eric Gordon. I like both his short tenure this time with the Clippers, but obviously he's still a fan favorite by being drafted by the team. I like him a lot. Is there overlap with Norman Powell? Yeah, there is some there. But during a long regular season, if you can find a way to bring him back, because he is one of those guys I feel like goes hard no matter the stakes out there.
Yeah.
He is someone who could be a regular season innings eater. I believe he's been relatively healthy over the last 5 years, even though he's getting older, and he had some major knee issues with New Orleans. I never thought he'd still be playing at this high of a level at this point. But someone who can stretch the floor, can hit deep three-pointers from the outside, that is a need for this team to open up driving lanes for hopefully Russell Westbrook if he's able to come back. And that was another guy that Lawrence Frank talked about.
Yeah.
They seem to all be on the same page regarding Russ.
Not shockingly. It's not a shock. At this point, if you're shocked that Kawhi and PG and Lawrence Frank want Russell Westbrook back, you must have decided to start watching the Clippers after their season is over. Yeah, he had a great quote about shout out your boy Greg. He's on the stream right now. I hope he's doing well. He said, Russell Westbrook said, "Hey, what do you need from me? What can I give you?" When you come in with that approach, he had to be highly adaptable. The role we described to him at the start was totally different at the end. Obviously, that makes sense. Kawhi and PG were gone. The issue with Westbrook, though, is now that we've gotten this clarified, the Clippers have to get under the tax apron to offer him the taxpayer mid-level exception, I believe. If not, it's literally just a minimum that they can offer him, which I don't know, man. I don't know if he takes a min or even, 6.5 for the taxpayer mid-level?
That's what it was last season.
Yeah.
I think there's something important to recognize here that, yes, you want all these guys back. Is it realistic to be able to get all of them back? No, it's not. Some of them outperform their contracts.
Yeah.
And we're due for a bigger payday and are going to take that. And you don't hold it against them. A guy wants to go out there and get his money. You say, okay, that's great. Feed your family. Do what you got to do.
Yeah.
You never want to poo-poo someone for doing that. But it's also a negotiation strategy that's already starting, really, with him saying, we want these guys back. Yeah. Of course, they want them all back, but they want to go into negotiations in good faith, and they want to express how they feel about that player. And, we've heard stuff in the past. With last summer, it was about Luke Kennard, and we're not trading Luke Kennard. Well, it ended up eventually happening. Things change. Yeah. We've seen this front office with Blake Griffin, building around him. 6 months later, things change. So to win at the highest level, you have to be shrewd and be willing to make tough decisions when the facts change out there. And I commend Lawrence Frank and the front office for being willing to do that and being flexible and not too rigid or too stubborn about it. When they realize, okay, we've made a mistake, they will cut bait with the guy. Or maybe it's not a mistake, but they feel like they have to bring in someone else, or they just value someone else, or are looking more towards the future with how they can free up money down the road to make bigger moves. Yeah. So there's a lot going on here than just, that means the Clippers are going to get these guys back because they want them back. There are a lot of hoops they're going to have to jump through to make all of this happen. But I think there are legitimate reasons to want the guys that they brought in at the trade deadline back, because for the most part, they performed well. I thought Mason Plumlee was especially good in that postseason playoff series. Playoff Plumlee seems to be a thing. We've seen it from the other side when he was with the Portland Trail Blazers against the Clippers in 2016. He raises his level of play in the postseason.
Absolutely. All right, we got about 10 minutes or so here. We got to talk the Terence Mann quotes, because that had some of the fan base a little upset. On Terence Mann, Lawrence Frank said, "I trust explicitly in Ty. Ty makes the lineups, decisions, and choice. Terence is versatility personified. He showed that he can take the tough defensive matchups. He can start, come off the bench. I think Ty Lue did a very good job with Terence." What are your thoughts on that? And then we'll get into what Terence Mann said on Twitter not long after this press conference was over. Maybe it's related, maybe it's not. Who knows?
I acknowledge Coach Lue had a really difficult job to manage personalities in a locker room and playing time for everyone out there on the court this season. Did I think Terence Mann could have been handled better? Yeah, probably. I just don't understand how a guy can, at one point, be getting DNPs early in the season, and then later on, he's in the starting lineup, and then back out of it after the trade deadline. It just seems like the way they managed Terence was up and down, and they don't know exactly what they have with him, or they don't know exactly how they want to use him, which is something Tyronn Lue explicitly expressed. He said it.
Yeah, and it's weird because it feels like, I think this was 213 Hoops who just tweeted this out, but they were kind of talking about how like Ty sees Terence as like a wing as opposed to a guard, where Terrence's skill set when it comes to offense, he's a slasher. We've all seen, you know what I mean? Like he's solid with the ball in his hand when he wants to get forward. So I think that's kind of a disconnect, but Terence then tweeted out in all capital letters not long after this press conference was over, LMAO, which if you follow Terence Mann, he's a great teammate. He's had multiple situations of like, hey, learn from this veteran point guard. And then he kind of gets his role change and everything like that. Like, where are you at on the LMAO tweet?
We don't know. He could have been watching Seinfeld reruns or anything like that. Who knows what he could have been speaking to? It's a cryptic tweet. If he was referring to this press conference,
stuff, like that's what I think is crazy. It's like Terence isn't a tweet guy, right? Like he's not usually a social media guy like this. So the timing is ominous a little bit.
If the subtext of it is relating to the press conference, then I'm sure he was unhappy in his role, if that's what we're inferring from this tweet. I don't know if that's a fact or not, but I know a lot of people are going to read into it that way. And guys want to play. They want to be out there on the court. And I think there's this groundswell of support for Terence Mann that has been there for so long.
And rightfully so. The support for Terence Mann, everyone is in the right here.
I think he's one of the top 5 most impactful players on this Clippers team. One of the guys that is always a positive for the most part, regardless of if his offense is working or if he's hitting shots. And typically he is. People don't realize this. Terence Mann is now a career 38% three-point shooter. Everyone's always like, man, he's shooting better from the outside this year. It's like, no, he's kind of been like this for a while now. He hasn't taken a lot of them, and I'm sure most of the numbers would say those are open three-pointers, but you're going to get those on a team with this much talent, and he's hitting them to his credit. So he has a skill set that is so diverse. You have to find ways to get him out there, but if the issue is Coach Lue views him as a wing, then you got to take away some of the other wings out there. Then you have to put him in a position where Terence Mann is more of a necessity each and every night, because we know what he brings to this ball club. And I don't know, for whatever reason, he doesn't have or seem to have the full trust of Coach Lue. And again, he came out and was asked early in the season, what's Terence Mann's role in this team? And he said, I don't know. Right. So I don't even think I'm paraphrasing that. I think that's an exact quote from Coach Lue. So I'm not trying to read into anything there. He said it. He said, I don't know. I'm hoping that his role on this team becomes much more clear this summer, and maybe it's because of roster construction and them missing some of the wings that were causing that lob jam, keeping Terence Mann out of the lineup.
Yeah, I also just checked. He did say, I don't know. He said, I don't know.
I do know. He said, I don't know. And I do know he said, I don't know. Okay.
Yeah. And maybe one thing, like you mentioned, like Lawrence talked about how not having PG and Kawhi impacted some of the 5-out lineup stuff.
And that's fair. We said that. Like, it's hard to do wings. You can't do wing stop when you don't have Kawhi and don't have Paul George. There is no wing stop without them. The entire blueprint for that starts around them. So This YouTube live is getting interesting.
This guy's a fucking idiot.
Well, can we read it and have some fun with it then?
Yeah, Ken Place, who watches all of our videos but hates everything I have to say, said, "Stop with the constant whining. T-Man is going to not be happy with season ending like all of us. Negative Chuck, non-positive Chuck is on a roll, complaining pathetic." Yeah, it was a nightmare of a season, man. Terrence should have played more. You dipshit. Stop watching us.
You know what?
I don't know. What else you want to say about it, Adam? Like,
does Ken think they're in the second round? I don't.
Yeah, Ken's waiting for PG to go ahead and lace those up.
The president of basketball operations is acknowledging it was a difficult season.
Right.
I think it's fair to paint it in that light, which is all Chuck is doing.
Well, I hope Ken's having a good day.
To one of the other, this is Lance, the legend, on our YouTube live. He says the issue and only issue is your two best players can't stay healthy and will never be healthy. Well, Lawrence Frank said that they're still committed to those guys, basically. When we traded for Paul and signed Kawhi, this is the quote, as a free agent, it wasn't for 1 or 2 years. Every year you have those guys, it gives you a chance. And I think people are downplaying that fact that with them, you do always have a chance. They are that great. They are that skilled. They are that talented. And not many teams can say that. You know, this is a roster that if they can be healthy, they have enough talent out there to win a championship, as opposed to a lot of teams in this league where they just don't have a talent. It's a non-starter to talk about them being a championship contender. The Clippers at least have guys that when they're on the court can perform at the highest level. I understand the frustration with them not being on the court enough, and they want to be there too. So they're doing everything they can to be out there, and I think there is something to be said for bringing in two of the best two-way players of this generation and still having a window because they're on your squad. That is saying something.
Michael Pena wrote a great article on The Ringer kind of about it, advocating to not blow up the Clippers, which I don't think will blow it up. Dyke isn't here. But I don't think they were ever going to actually blow it up. That's not what I don't think Steve Ballmer wants to bottom out with a new arena. Like it's just not going to happen.
He's expressed that. He said that recently at an Intuit Dome conference or powwow or whatever, however you want to put it. He was on stage talking about how, you know, we always want to be competitive. There could be reload type of years, but he's not ever looking to have a hard reset. And again, the saying is the best advantage in sports is great ownership. I think you have that in Steve Ballmer, Clipper Nation. So regardless of how this season went, you're in good hands with Steve Ballmer, who is hell-bent on getting this franchise to their first championship.
Yeah, Pena's article basically wrote, like, they just have to wait for injury luck, which I'm not going to sit here and pretend that that feels good. That's very frustrating to hear, as we've been waiting for that for every year except for the bubble year for the most part, which is frustrating. I think everyone can acknowledge that. But it's also like that's what the issue was. It's just not like
I think
fun. You know what I mean? It's really hard. I'm not saying that it's easy to be okay with that. He also suggested we should hire Nick Nurse, but I don't know. I don't want to do that. But we just got to wait it out. It's a hard thing to ask fans to do, but there's huge changes coming. The only players they mentioned that they wanted to bring back specifically of the new guys were Plumlee, Westbrook, and EJ. So like, I think Rocco's gone. I think Morris is gone. I think there's going to be like some pretty major turnover.
I also think Lawrence Frank, with some of his comments today, was pointing to the fact that this was bigger than injuries with how the regular season went. Because combined, I think Paul George and Kawhi Leonard ended up at, 106 games total played by them, which was the most during a regular season. And they still only won 44 games. So there were bigger issues going on there than just injuries. And Lawrence Frank pointed that out, which I find encouraging. They're not ignoring the elephant in the room of how bad this regular season really was for them and how much they underachieved and underperformed.
Yeah, Christopher Nunes says, need more T-Bone. I was surprised Bones wasn't Bones wasn't mentioned in the presser because I think
he signed.
Yeah, that's true. He signed. I just thought he deserved a shout out. Bones was great.
Hey, Lawrence Frank, it was after the Lakers game, right? Where he went into the locker room and apparently said, "Busy effing Bones."
That's what we need.
I think he's a fan.
Yeah, no, Bones rules. He was great. But yeah, I don't know. Also, for those of you wondering, we're not going to get exit interviews. Like the Clippers, a lot of teams do like exit interviews where they don't do every player, but they do a pretty large group of them. The Clippers don't. So Lawrence's exit, this is kind of what we're going to get. Last year we got, I think, Batum and Morris. Like those were the 2 exit interviews we got. And that just happened to be after the playoffs.
Jonathan maybe English, said this on our YouTube live. The team not taking the regular season seriously is a culture issue. The team didn't have a guy that would be the culture setter all year, and it showed until Russ got signed. I think there's something to that.
Yeah,
there was something missing with not having Patrick Beverley over the last year and a half. The one thing I would always say about Pat Bev was he could turn a 1 out of 82 meaningless regular season game into a playoff-like atmosphere with the edge that he plays with, the competitive streak in him, and it would come out and be infectious for the rest of the squad out there. And Russ certainly is cut from the same cloth in that way.
Yeah, they got to bring him. I'm happy we have the front office we do because it's going to take some finagling to get Russell Westbrook back on this team.
Honestly, I think that's one of the most comforting things about this Clippers organization, aside from Steve Ballmer, which is the biggest thing they have going for them. I think this is one of the best front offices in sports. Like, they will leave no stone unturned. They will find a way to make this team better. And it starts with staring at the face of failure that this season was, to a degree. And I'm not talking failure like Giannis Antetokounmpo and explaining all of that. They're in a different position there in Milwaukee. And I thought it was pretty interesting. But, I mean, they did fail only winning 44 games in this regular season. It should have been closer to 50. We were talking before the year, acknowledging that Kawhi and Paul George were likely going to miss 20 to 25 games each. And we still thought, with the depth on this roster, that they could be close to being the first Clippers team to ever win 60 games in a regular season. They weren't. It did not turn out that way.
Yeah, very true. Someone in the chat said, if no Russ, then Pat Bev.
What's up, Anthony C?
That would be sick. I mean, but I'm just not sure. Look at his contract real quick.
And he went back to Chicago and actually helped turn a miserable season around for them at the end. Yeah. They started to really win some games. I know they lost in the play-in. They didn't make it into a 7-game series. But Pat Bev is certainly a winner. He has been someone who would typically always makes the playoffs. He would make that known. Yeah. This was one of those rare years he didn't.
He was a min contract. He's unrestricted. I think if no Westbrook, bring obviously very different roles. I don't think Bev is going to start for this team if he's on this team, but bring him in for the culture. I would love Bev on a minimum next year, if anything, just to galvanize the locker room and get people locked in.
Your fave five head. I thought I was looking at gang. I thought I was looking at Sheed. He said this organization is not as well run as people thought. 100. I think Lawrence Frank acknowledging a lot of the same missteps this season that the fans have been talking about goes a long way with me in this press conference. Well, no, I think that's meaningful. Yeah, the proof is in the pudding. It's more about actions than words always. But when they lost in the bubble, he said, look, we have to realize what we did wrong. We have to look at this as a failure and come back from this. We can't just sweep it under the rug and act like it didn't happen when there were obvious failures out there. And they're doing the same thing now.
Yeah, and they got rid of our coach who ruined the bubble situation for us. So, a bit of I don't know if this was a good news day. It was a little eye-opening. It was nice to hear Lawrence Frank acknowledge that the regular season was a failure, because it was. And we'll just wait for this front office to make whatever insane moves they got to make. Adam, we both have to go back to our regular jobs. Anything else we want to send these fans out with before we go back to work?
No, but a little tease of what's to come in this offseason. I still think there's a good chance the Clippers go big game hunting. and they go after Zach LaVine or Bradley Beal or Damian Lillard. And if that's the case, I would expect Terence Mann to have to be included in one of those moves to bring in a third star.
Yeah.
Because I just think if you're doubling down on having Kawhi in Paul George, you need to have a little bit of a safety blanket or a security blanket during the regular season, whether that's Russ or Russ and someone else or just that third guy to help support them during a long regular season and take some of the load off of two injury-prone superstars. I think there's a good chance that ends up happening. We'll see.
We'll see. Let's hope so. All right. Thanks, everyone, hanging on the stream. We're going to have this out as a podcast episode too, whenever we get around to getting that done. But hey, let's go Clips, and we'll be back with Tripod next week, right?
Yeah, and Ken, simmer down now.
All right. We'll talk to everybody later. Have a good rest of your weekend, Clippers fans.